These young dudes out here don't respect shit until you put the barrel in their ear and let the text spit. I just might catch a case on my next hit, remove their whole face on some special effect shit. So show respect, Drake, or I'ma have a flashback. Digging through the dresser like fuck it, where my mask at?
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. So today we supposed to finally get into part 1 of me and my interview with Graham, the ex-white supremacist. Yard down! And so today, we got something different from you guys today. Today I got my first interview going on. This right here is Graham. And you know, since Graham is sitting right here, he's gonna tell you his story. We're gonna be talking back and forth. And let's kick it off. Before I get started, will you please remember to like, to subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way anytime I drop a story, you'll be notified. Also, I believe if you go to your notification bell and you put all, if it's on personalized, change it to all. Maybe that's why some of you guys may not be getting notified. Anyway, with all that being said, let's get started, man. It's gonna be a great interview. So we got Graham here today. Graham, so tell them a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Graham. I used to go by Casper inside, and you know, I'm a former white supremacist, prison gang member, and you know, I did 14 years. The majority of my life in the carceral system from 14 until 35.
Okay. So now when you say white supremacists, can you break that down? For some of us who may not know, is there a difference between skinhead, or can you elaborate on that?
So white supremacist is the more conventionally accepted term. I was a skinhead. I was involved in USAS, and it was a gang that was like blossoming in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I joined at a very young age, and that was my life for the majority of the years that I was out and the years that I was in.
Okay. So if you don't mind, give us a little background. You know, how, of course, you wasn't come out the womb skinhead and this and that. So give us a little background on you know, your upbringing and all that, if you don't mind.
So I was raised in Huntington Beach, right near here, Huntington Beach, California. It's kind of middle class and then like bridging onto affluent community. I was not affluent. My family was hella poor. My mom and dad were in and out of prison. And I was looking for something to attach myself to. I went through a lot of abuse as a kid. My dad was pretty abusive. He was a drug addict. He was addicted to heroin. My mom was too. So I found my way out of the house as much as possible and into the neighborhoods. And that's where I found basically skinheads. And it wasn't necessarily racial at first. It became that as we got older. It became more of an ideological thing, but as a kid it was really just us running around causing havoc, and it grew into something else as I got older.
And now I have a quick question. Like me, I've done 24 years. I had a life sentence, and in order to get out, we have to go to the board. And at some point in time, they started bringing in these self-help groups, and we have to, you know, learn a little bit about ourselves. So I know that, and a lot of people don't realize that how we grow up sometimes plays an extremely huge part on how we turn out, or some of the characteristics that we develop. So you spoke a little bit about being abused or physically had a physically violent father. Do you think that played a part in later on your aggressiveness and stuff like that? And if so, please elaborate.
Yeah, for sure. So like for me, everything came down from a pretty early age, as far as I could remember, to proving my manhood, like proving like what made me a man, because my father would constantly question me, beat me down, and so I wanted to validate myself and certify amongst all my peers that like I'm a man. And what that took was violence, being able to pull girls, money. Those were the things that I pursued, and I found all that in the skinhead mechanism. Like violence was the key, money, partying, that was another factor, and girls were a factor. So I found all that in that, and as I got older, like the image that I put out became who I thought I really was. And so for a decade and a half, I really lost myself, legit. Like I thought that Casper was all that there was, and there was so much beneath the surface.
Right. And so what I'm hearing is basically just like a key connection with all the gangs, whether you're Hispanic, whether you're black, whether you're Crip or Blood, is one commonality, and that is violence. Right?
Absolutely.
So as long as you was violent, willing to put your foot in somebody's ass, you'd be accepted. You know what I'm saying? And that's a key component in all these games. You know, because the more you kick ass, the more people in
status. It becomes status. Yeah, right. For sure.
Right. So give me like a little bit more of your background on once you started leaving the house and things like you say, and then you made a good point too. Like when we join gangs initially, we don't see it as a gang. Yeah. We just, me and my buddies were hanging out. You know, we happen to have the same thoughts on some things, and then as we get older, you know, this bond becomes tighter, and sometimes we get more deeply embedded into this type of philosophy or ideology, whatever we choose to use. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so like basically when I was a kid, I dove into the violence because that's what I learned at home. I dove directly into that. I became pretty good at it. I was a small, scrappy kid. I was capable of doing a lot of harm. So at 12 I ran away. I was on the streets for about 2 years. I'd stay on friends' couches or in parks or whatever, but that was kind of a part of the scene, like pass out drunk, be where you're at, and wake up the next day and push. So like at 14 they took me, they put me in juvenile hall, they made me ward of the court. I was put through foster care, group homes, and I kept running from these spots and going back to the homeboys because that was pretty much what I knew to be my family. I had a grandmother at home, but nothing really else outside of her that was what I would call stable today.
Now I got a quick question for you. Since you said you went to juvenile hall at 14, and I know I went to juvenile hall around the age of 17, and from my recollection, I didn't see a whole lot of white people in juvenile hall.
Not really,
so
no.
What was your experience like? And did you have it rough? Did other people, racists, try to pick on you, or?
No, I mean, as long as you're willing to fight, juvenile hall is fine. Like if you're willing to fight, then most people they'd rather see if you're gonna get down, and if you get down, leave you alone.
Right.
So it's like 1, maybe 2 fights, as opposed to if you're not willing to get down, they will just ride you. So I just got down as soon as I got in there.
Right.
They have this thing like the day room set up in like a horseshoe, and you have to you have to ask for permission to stand up. If you stand up without permission, the cops come. And so like they would just call you out across the room and say stand up. So you stand up, you get down in the center, they pepper spray you, pull you to your cell, you get 5 days loss of privileges, and after that, you know, you're pretty much good. Like I got down, I was willing to stand up.
Wow.
So it always comes down to proving your manhood, like proving that you're down to do whatever.
And then of course, the more you prove your manhood, the more you become comfortable improving your manhood, and fighting is the norm. Either whether you have a fear or you not have a fear, you realize through this I get gained acceptance, and for the most part, most people will leave me the fuck alone.
For sure.
Right.
And really the second part, like I wouldn't have said that at that age, and I wouldn't have said that in adulthood, but what I really wanted was to attain a status where nobody fucked with me.
Right.
Because as a kid, I mean, I was a small kid. I got fucked with at home. I got fucked with at school. And if I could attain a status where nobody was going to fuck with me, then I'm golden. And so that's just what I did. I would go to great lengths to prove how violent I could be. And that ultimately amounted in, fighting a life sentence, ending up with a 15-year sentence and being in prison for the majority of my life. That's what it ended up as.
So before we get deeply into that, let's start talking about a little bit about when you first started getting into trouble and things along those lines.
For sure. So I was first arrested in like 4th grade for breaking into the school. Fast forward to like 7th, 8th grade, I got arrested for breaking into another school. I don't know what my fascination with schools was. I have no idea. But I would just continually break into these spots and take stuff from them and get caught. So I got put on juvenile probation. And that was ultimately what led me to getting put ward of the court. I had a probation officer named Vicki Kennedy, and she kept going down to the juvenile hall and getting me out because they could do that when you're a kid.
Right.
So I kept stacking cases on top of cases that were going through court, and she would get me out. And then finally she's like, "That's it. That's enough. 5 cases. That's enough. You're gonna stay in." So
okay. So what was your first crime that led you to prison?
The first crime that led me to prison was a aggravated assault, terrorist threats, and they charged with home invasion, and I got dropped. I went up against someone who owed me money, and it was like some small amount. I can't even remember the amount. It's pretty pathetic. But I went up against someone who owed me money. I went to his house. I told his people like he needs to pay me by this date.
Right.
I got hella drunk. I went back to that house on that date. I kicked in the door. We stormed inside, and then they charged assault. My co-defendant told on me. And I was facing, at that time, it was my first time as an adult, and so I was facing like 7 years or 8 years, and it got dropped down to a 2-year, and I did a 2-year term.
Okay, so what was your first, I guess, experience in county jail like? I guess I'm asking, where did the skinhead ideology start to form? What do you think?
I'd say in county jail. That's a good question. So before that, there was a whole lot of loose ends to the whole thinking of it, right? Like I would hang out with who I wanted. It wasn't really super ideological. We had some racist shit that we did, but like ultimately it wasn't super ideological. It was just getting drunk, having a good time, going to shows, whatever. And then I went to county jail, and like everything's divided inside, both in prison and in jail.
Right.
So in seeing that divide in Orange County Jail right here.
So excuse me, I kind of know what you're talking about, but some of our listeners may not, or viewers, so can you give them or expound more deeply? So when you say divided, you're talking about racial divide,
Racial
right?
divide, 100%. The county jail separates whites, Hispanics, black folk, Asians, all from one another.
Right.
And they group people together. So they'll group whites and Hispanics together because they say they program together. And that isn't always the case.
So they kind of, and I noticed as well as the prisons too, so they kind of perpetuate
For sure.
the racial bullshit, the
They
racial
create
prejudice.
those divides. They
Okay.
create that shit because otherwise, if they put everybody in county jail together, it probably wouldn't even be a racial issue. But because they separate folk into different floors and different units, the second you cross one another, there's tension because you're like, I'm not supposed to be around this person.
Because I noticed in watching some of these other prison shows in other states, there's no racial separation.
Not at all, yeah.
But I've heard a lot of people from down south and this and that say California is actually more racial than these other states, because in these other states you know where you stand.
Yep.
California is kind of like a facade, I would say. You know.
For sure.
And so
It makes it easier for the cops to classify us. They
Right.
divide by race.
Right.
They can classify by race. They can classify issues by race, anything, 115s, whatever. So it's all for the cops' benefit. We don't really realize it. You go into county jail on some small ticket, and you're just like, this is how it is.
Right. So when you come in, give us a little idea of how that works. Okay, so you get arrested, you come to the county jail. So what's up? You guys know me. I clown a little bit and shit. So when you come through there, it's like, what's up, brother? Where you from, brother? So give
It's
us.
not necessarily
give us
like
how does
that.
that work?
There's also, just like juvenile hall, there's a very few white people in county jail.
Right.
Because the system's designed to take marginalized folks and pack them in there. So in county jail, you come across maybe in a tank of 112 white boys.
Wow.
Even in Orange County. But they do have that approach. Like they'll be like, what's your paper? Let me see your paperwork. Cool. If you have court stuff, let me see what you're here for. They might call and have their people check up and see if it's all clear. And if you're not there for a sex offense or something weird, or you didn't tell on anybody, you're good.
Wow.
And you kind of float from that point.
So that's kind of deep. So let me expound on that a little bit and make it clear for our viewers. So when you come in, they want to see your court charges. Basically, when you say paperwork, he's talking about your court charges.
Yeah.
They want to make sure you're not charged with anything that they frown on.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people fail to realize, even though we're inmates, we're prisoners, convicts, whatever the terminology, there are certain crimes that we frown on as well, and you will be ostracized, and physically you'll get you some lefts and rights upside your head if you come in there with the wrong charges.
Yep.
So they want to make sure that you are
That you
basically,
check out,
quote
is the
unquote,
term.
you check out. So,
Yep.
so talk a little bit about that.
So, like sex offenses, child crimes. It depends on where you're at, but sometimes even domestic violence cases. Like it depends on the nature of the crime. All that shit is out. Like that is not going to fly through the general population, and they'll put hands on you if you have any of those cases.
Right. Now, you know what I always found kind of weird, I guess I would say, is a lot of us convicts, ex-convicts, we hate the police.
Mm-hmm.
We know the police tell lies on us. We know the police, will do anything sometimes to get a conviction. Sometimes I was just thinking about grabbing my damn cell phone. When in prison, I got maybe about 18 write-ups. About at least 14 of them, the cops either straight out lied or they'd embellish. But
Yeah.
I noticed the second that the cops charge us with a possible crime that's not acceptable, we don't give any benefit of a doubt. We don't think about how they'll lie. It's just automatically you're out.
For sure.
Isn't that kind of ironic?
Oh, absolutely.
While we hate the police, but if they say the wrong thing about a certain person, it's like then we're quick to take their word.
I fully agree. And I mean, they use that stuff. They use all the systems that we set up for ourselves
Right.
within against us.
Right.
So, the idea of being racially segregated is something that we did in the 60s, way the fuck back.
Right.
Just so that we could have some sense of identity and be able to stick up for the people who we agree with along common terms, right? We come from the same neighborhoods, whatever. And they use that against us to create race riots and create all sorts of tension. They did the same thing with specific crimes. Like, we know we know that there's a high rate. I don't even have the numbers right now, but there's a high rate of crimes that people get charged with that the cops are just throwing yeast on everything so that they could get you to plead out.
Right.
That's ultimately what it is. It's all about plea bargains, but inside, like, you can only read black and white. That's it. Everything's super binary, you know?
And so what he basically said is, you know, for you guys who may not understand the prison jargon or the terminology, the courts and the police will charge you with a super high crime they know you're not even guilty of.
Yep.
But the time is so extreme, and a lot of people don't want to even take the chance of getting convicted and doing all that time, so they'll plea bargain instead of going to trial. They'll take a lesser. So maybe you're charged with crime A, and that carries 15 years if you go to trial and lose. So a person will take a deal. Your lawyers and the district attorney will barter back and forth. And you, after a couple of months of going to court, you're tired of going back and forth to court, waking up at 6 in the morning, staying in court all day long or whatever it is, getting a sack lunch. Yeah, you're handcuffed next to each other. So you end up saying, oh, fuck it, man. They're offering me 3 years. I'll take it. Give me the 3 years, man. I'll go to prison. I'll do half of that. I'll come home. So this is a well-known tactic that they use.
98% of convictions